Hello, welcome to the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione. We're here in the Torrid of Pleasure, listening to music, watching planes crash, having a good time. I'm your host. I'm the Lord Chamberlain of the Enchanted Kingdom. I'm Zip Gun. And today on I Am That Sucker, we're going to discuss yet another box set that I just had to buy. I just had to buy it because it was an artist whose music has been quite hard to locate in physical form because the original albums have become so valuable that nobody can afford to buy them. Certainly I can't. And it's the artist in question today is Nucleus and Ian Carr. And the good folks at Esoteric Records, which is the historical reissue imprint of Cherry Red, have seen fit to put out all of his records that he made in the 70s for the fabulous Vertigo label. Now, if you know anything about the Vertigo label, they're the Mercury/Phonogram version of Harvest and or Daram, which were the hip underground rock labels of EMI and Decca, respectively, and both those labels did much good work in the propagation of prog rock, underground rock, psychedelic rock, whatever you want to call it, off the beaten track stuff. And Vertigo was set up by Phonogram as a response to this, and they signed bands like Black Sabbath, they signed Rod Stewart, they signed Gentle Giant, and as a testament to how useless Mercury in America was, which was, of course, Phonogram's label in America, a lot of these bands, you'll go, Black Sabbath, weren't they on Warner Brothers? Yeah, they were, because Mercury decided not to put it out in America. What were they thinking? Rod Stewart did come out on Mercury in North America. Gentle Giant didn't. A lot of the stuff didn't. Ian Carr's Nucleus started out as an actual band. It was just Nucleus. And there were a lot of really good people in this band. And as a big fan of what you might call fusion music, prog rock, I don't know what you would call it, I've sort of known about these guys. I have one LP I bought many years ago, the Solar Plexus album, and I quite liked it. It's British jazz with fusion, undertones. Ian Carr is a British trumpet player, very British, very much under the influence of Miles Davis, so much so that when he got the idea to form this band, it was largely a response to having heard Bitches Brew by Miles Davis. And the time was ripe for a fusion band, so he formed this band. And the original band had some pretty heavy hitters in it. And, like, for instance, and yet there's guys in here that haven't really gotten famous, if you will. Some of them are legends. For example, Ian Carr, okay. Carl Jenkins on baritone sax, oboe, electric piano. Carl Jenkins, now Sir Carl Jenkins, British composer, probably the most popular composer in Britain right now. John Marshall on drums, ended up in Soft Machine, as did Carl Jenkins. Chris Spedding on guitar. Very odd place to find Chris Spedding. And they did, I do believe it was 4 records for Vertigo. 3 records for Vertigo, sorry. 3 albums. They did this, the one that this is the cover of, Elastic Rock. They did one called We'll Talk About It Later. And then he got an Arts Council grant to do an album called Solar Plexus, which is the one I've had for many, many years. And it's an expanded band. It adds Kenny Wheeler, who's a terrific trumpet player, British trumpet player. Harry Beckett also plays on it on trumpet. Who else is on this that we might know? There's even a VCS3 synthesizer. What's not to like? You don't hear much of it here. And anyway, this the first one especially, Elastic Rock, was very highly regarded when it came out. They won some kind of award at Montreux for Best New Band or some such thing. And it basically set the template which was to come for 9 albums on Vertigo. If you are a fan of the ostinato, you're going to like this music, because there are literally dozens of fabulous ostinato bass lines in this box set. And me, I like a good ostinato as much as anybody. And the first album consisted largely of Carl Jenkins compositions, which is not a huge shock. Ian Carr actually only writes one piece by himself. There's a few co-writes, Spedding Brown, Carr and Jenkins. There's one where the whole band gets a credit, which means it's an improvisation, no doubt. And it's good. Now, is it mind-bendingly good? Well, it's a little dated. Elastic Rock came out in 1970. We'll talk about it later. Came out in 71. And Solar Plexus came out in 71. They were all recorded in 1970, I believe. Yeah, so he was busy. And the first 3 records are essentially the band. And it was run like a band. And from just listening to the various descriptions by the various band members, Ian was a kind of a prickly character, and he was a little bit tough to get along with, I think. And this resulted in, after Solar Plexus, the 4 key components of the band all quitting. So Spedding, Jenkins, Marshall, and who's the other one? I can't remember who the other guy was. All quit. And Carr was bitter. It was the breakup, especially with Carl Jenkins, who was really kind of the primary writer for the first 2 albums anyway. And I don't know if they ever spoke again. He really did hold a grudge on this. The 3rd album, Solar Plexus, was all Ian Carr compositions for a larger ensemble from, he got an Arts Council grant to do it. And it's good. It's very impressively done. It is uniquely British. The saxophonists, especially on soprano, have that British sound. It's thin, but it's delicate, and it's not gutless by any stretch of the imagination. I don't want to say that. But there's a real unique British embouchure in saxophonists that you can pick it up quite quickly. So when the band basically mutinied on him, it sounds like, he was in a bit of a quandary because he couldn't really use the name Nucleus, apparently, because of management issues. So he did a record. He managed to keep the Vertigo contract as his contract. And he came out with a record called Belladonna that was ostensibly a solo record, but not really. It was him and his new band, which featured Roy Babington on bass guitar, who would also go to Soft Machine eventually, and this kid called Alan Holdsworth on guitar. I forgot completely about this entry in the Holdsworth discography. Now, I like Alan Holdsworth, but I like him better when he's playing under somebody else's records. When he was allowed to do records under his own name, there was too much wanking. Now, if you know anything about Alan Holdsworth, you'll know that he's a guitar of breathtaking technique. Legato technique, as they say. This guy could cram a lot of notes into a solo and do it very, very artfully, and he was exciting. And that's the 3rd CD here. It starts with the album Belladonna. And now they've managed to cram 9 albums on 6 CDs. Whole thing cost me $60 delivered, which is like really good. These records on Discogs now average about $150 a piece, if you can find them. So I had never heard a lot of this stuff because it's just prohibitively expensive and not really available anywhere. And these are really good records. Now, I'm a big fan of Soft Machine, and like I say, John Marshall, Alan Holdsworth, Roy Babington, Carl Jenkins all ended up in Soft Machine. Soft Machine, of course, being a band that started out as a psychedelic pop band and very quickly turned into a British fusion band, and pretty much stayed a British fusion band, and a good one. I really have a soft spot for them. I loved them all through the 70s, all the while being completely ignorant of this band, which is basically really similar. The difference is that these guys made a lot more records. He had this great contract with Vertigo, which gave him serious visibility in the marketplace. And yet they didn't monkey with what he wanted to do. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted. And what he wanted to do was pretty challenging. He did some very large pieces. There's an album here called Labyrinth, which is another Arts Council record where he has the wonderful Norma Winstone on lyricless vocals. And he has Dave McRae on this amazing modified Fender Rhodes piano. It has the greatest sound. It's like distorted, angry sound. Dave McRae went on to play with Robert Wyatt's Matching Mole band, which was his kind of fusion band. And Matching Mole was a little bit hit and miss. I want to like it more than I like it. And so this was the beginning of, I think about it as a 3-album stint with McRae playing piano, electric piano in this band. Also, there's a lot of sort of cameos by a guy named Gordon Beck. And I know Gordon Beck because he wrote a great song for Gary Burton called Mallet Man. And he's also a composer, although he doesn't write anything on any of these. One of the things about these was their covers were really great. Some of them, anyway. It's funny because the early records had these fabulous covers. Like, that's the inside of the Elastic Rock cover. The outside, it was die cut. So you'd open the cover and then you'd see this. The second album was also die cut. And where's the cover of that? Somewhere. Maybe it's on it. Now, the one thing, now this is a quibble. They do give you all the covers, but they sort of give them to you in kind of scattershot fashion. That's the cover of Solar Plexus. They don't really tell you that. That's the inner cover. Where's the other one? It's here somewhere, isn't it? Anyway, I'm trying to find the cover for the second album, which is not here. Where is it? Anyway, it was also a die-cut cover. And the third album was Solar Plexus. The fourth album was Labyrinth, which has a pretty interesting cover. And I do suspect that the covers are a large reason why these are so valuable. The album Roots, which is sort of has a great cover by one of my favorite cover artists, George Hardy, NTA, who did much work in the 70s for Pink Floyd. He did 10cc, he did Paul McCartney, Venus and Mars, and he did a lot of really cool work back in the day. Now, there it is. That's the second album cover, the die cut. And basically, as time went on, like the Holdsworth band was, a lot of it was new guys. And then from that point on, the bands would morph. People would come, people would go. And as you go on in time, the people coming in were less well known. Jocelyn Pritchett on guitar, I've not heard of him. Ken Shaw on guitar, I've not heard of him. Jeff Castle on electric piano and synthesizer, that name doesn't ring a bell. To not put too fine a point on it, these records, as they got going, after Labyrinth, there was the album Roots. Roots is pretty good. After Roots, you have an album called Under the Sun, and suddenly the covers get really boring. So, Under the Sun was just like, a picture of them in the rain, I think, if I remember right. And then they did an album called, that's the cover for Roots, the proper cover. And I like that cover. That's a great cover. Under the Sun came out with yet another newish band. And after that came an album called Snake Hips. There's Under the Sun. This is Under the Sun's cover. That's not quite as dynamic. Then there was an album called Snake Hips, etc., which we revert back to, hey, great cover, great front cover. Sadly, terrible back cover. That's a bad cover, man. And the record, at this point, they started turning into kind of the British version of the Brecker brothers. Not bad, certainly okay, but, you know. And they went from strength to strength, finally doing an album called Alley Cat with yet another god-awful cover. It's really funny. They were so hit and miss. But having said that, there are moments of real goodness in this box. A lot of them are grouped towards the beginning of the box set, but even Alley Cat has a couple of great ostinato-based numbers. Snake Hips is got, I think, at least one good one. Under the Sun has a couple of good guitar solos. But for 60 bucks, I thought this was a hell of a good deal, and I've enjoyed it far more than I thought I would. I knew I would like it. I also knew that I wouldn't love it. And, you know, had it have been a 9-disc box set of the ilk of, say, Richard and Linda Thompson, which was a lot like 160 bucks, I wouldn't have bought it. So the covers, I would have preferred the covers to be intact, but that's a really minor quibble because you do get both the front and back of each album cover, but they're kind of mixed up between the book and the actual sleeves of the CDs. But it's done with reasonable care by Esoteric. I did find one mistake on it where on Labyrinth they don't credit the bass clarinetist Tony Coe, which is interesting because he's all over the record. And there is actually a handbill where he's mentioned, so you can figure it out. But it's a mistake, and it's one of those mistakes you go, come on, guys, jeez. But that's for anally retentive record collectors such as myself to worry about. If you're an Alan Holdsworth junkie, and I know you're out there, some of you, be warned that there's exactly one terrific solo on this very early, 1972 or 3, so it's before Soft Machine. The guy was just getting it together, and but he plays very good support guitar on this. I will tell you this: he is not funky. He tries to get funky in one song, and it's a little bit embarrassing. And in fact, none of this is particularly funky. They're Englishmen. They can't get, you know, they're white English guys. So when they try to get funky, they end up being more like what Robert Christgau calls finky. This isn't terrible, but it's not like Miles Davis. The deep irony here is that Ian Carr wrote what many say is the definitive biography of Miles Davis. I don't think that. I think it's actually rather flawed. And the irony is that he discusses the 1972-75 Miles band, and he kind of dismisses it. The guitar players are just freaking out all the time and whatnot. And I disagree with this, of course. I think the 72-75 Miles band was fantastic, and it was deeply informed by black and African culture, something that these guys would never be able to do because they are neither black nor African. So it's funny, and apparently Ian, well, in the article in the Prog magazine that I got, John Marshall starts up by saying, yeah, he could rub people the wrong way, which is a nice way of saying that he was probably a bit of a dick to work for. After the Vertigo contract ran out, 9 records, he got another one with Capitol, made a couple of more fusion-y records that were of diminishing quality, I would say. And then he went and did many more things. He died about 10 years ago. Marshall and him made up long after the fact, and Marshall played with him again. He did a lot of really good work, and he did a lot of good things for British jazz, I think. And like I say, if you're interested in the peculiarity that informs a lot of British jazz, not peculiarity, but there's a sound in British jazz that once you get the hang of it, it's really obvious. And this is, if you are, for instance, if you like Soft Machine, if you like Alan Holdsworth, if you like early fusion music with an emphasis on the jazz, I really can't recommend this highly enough. For 60 bucks, it's a really good deal. And it took me, I bought this 3 weeks ago, and because my New Year's resolution here on the channel is to actually give a good listen to everything I'm reviewing, it's taking me this long to make the video. And I can say I would give this, you know, in the Christgau rating scale, which is a handy one, I'd give this a minimum of a B+, and probably an A-, because parts of this I really, really like. And like I say, if you like ostinato bass lines, you're going to love this, because there's literally a couple of dozen good ones on this. There you go. That's it for this edition of I Am That Sucker. We'll continue in this vein as often as we acquire such items. So I hope this enlightens you a bit about this guy. Very, very underrated and unknown. Barely got any release. I think one Snake Hips got released in America on Sire, which is probably the weakest record in here. So kind of too bad he never made it in America, but oh well. Sometimes that happens. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications button, and we'll get back at you with some other stuff. I just had somebody come to the door with some stuff that I'm going to do a video on once I've absorbed it. And yeah, keep the hits coming. Take care of yourselves. We're still in the middle of a COVID outbreak, so wear your mask, be tolerant, and I'm giving it 3 more months before we all start getting our shots. And then maybe things will start to improve. But until then, stay at home and listen to good music. That's what I'm doing. Thanks a lot. Take it easy. We'll talk to you soon.